Just welcome to everybody. Hope everybody had a good New Year. I assume it was probably pretty quiet, like mine was, but hopefully everybody's doing well and surviving the virus. Um, I do have one question that I wanted to ask right off the bat, and I'm hoping that did anyone bring their crystal ball with them tonight? Because I have lots of questions that we need answers to. So anybody?
We'd sign up for that.
Yeah. So,
Mark, what about magic wand?
well, hey, that's better than nothing. So I've got lots of questions. Probably you probably do too. You know what's going to happen this year, and what's 2021 going to be like? When will we get the virus under control? When will we be able to meet in person again? I'm really looking forward to that. How will COVID-19 impact our summertime conservation projects? You know, the big unknown there. When will Dave Beatty catch a trout over 6 inches long? And I hear that's been a while, huh, Dave? Any comments? Well, let's see. Needless to say, a lot of questions there that we can't really answer right now, but you know, we'll work through it over the next few months. So with all those questions, I guess I was just going to say there is one thing that we do know, that conservation projects will go on. You know, hopefully the COVID-19 situation will keep improving as more vaccinations are administered this winter and spring. But yeah, conservation projects will go on. I was on a couple last summer, you know, where we just had to wear masks and try to stay separated, but we still got some things done. We'll support the Forest Service and the National Park Service as much as we can with the Poudre Headwaters project. And if the Forest Service has some fire restoration efforts going on, which I'm sure they will, then we'll try to support that if there's some kind of a role for us there.
Hey, Mark, I'd like to also get a little, we're planning on plan A of having the day camp this summer at its normal time. We'll also come up with plan Bs and plan Cs. But there was a national camp director meeting last night talking about all the things trying to make that happen. So our intention is to drive forward for our summer camp.
Okay.
What are the dates of that, Dave?
It's the last week of July, and I'll get the specific dates, but yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. So the last thing I was going to say was just, you know, there could be hopefully will be a lot of projects and a lot of work this summer. And to me, that means that we're going to need a lot of helping hands. So I know Zach and I have already talked about this, but we're going to try to get the word out to as many people as we can in Northern Colorado, and on, you know, who we are, what we do, and as much information as we can on the Poudre Headwaters project. And for those that have joined us tonight, may not be familiar with that. That's our actually the U.S. Forest Service is the lead agency, and that's to reintroduce the greenback cutthroat trout into the headwaters of the Poudre River. So that's right in our backyard. And what a great project that'll be when it comes to fruition. You know, it started with some, I guess, maybe smaller efforts several years ago, and they think it'll still be another 10 to 12 years. So tons and tons of work to do there, but wow, that'll be a real legacy project that we can hopefully brag to our grandkids about someday. So anyways, yeah, we're going to really try to let everyone in Northern Colorado know who we are, what we do, and try to, you know, connect with anybody who values the outdoors, conservation, beautiful rivers, and clean water. So with that, that was my only comments. Are there any other announcements, like Dave just mentioned there, that we still going to try to go on with our youth camp? And if anyone else has anything they'd like to quickly bring up before we move on, then please let me know.
I have to announce the raffle winners.
Oh, okay, yeah, great. I was going to turn the floor over to you next, Jeannie.
Okay.
And then after that, after you talk about the raffle, we'll go ahead and give the floor to Paul Bunker to talk about the Yellowstone cutthroats. And then last on our agenda would be Colin, and he will talk about our February Fly Tying Expo, which of course will be done virtually, but hopefully we'll still get a good turnout and have some fun with that. So yeah, Jeannie, if I can go ahead and turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. I have winners here, and actually there's only 4 winners, but I'm going to start with prize number 5. That goes to Greg McCoy, and he is with Platte Rivers Veterans Life, and he is the games manager for them. So he wins the canisters and the oven mitt. And then Dave Morris is also with Platte Rivers Veterans Fly Fishing, and he wins prize 4, which is the canteen and the cap from CTU. And then I'm going to announce prize 2 next, and that goes to Mark Randolph, and he wins the fly line and the casting instruction book from Lefty Cray. So congratulations to them. And then Dave Hausler, he wins prize 3, which is the fly fishing net made by our president, Mark Miller. And then
All right.
Dave also wins prize 1, which is the Elkhorn fly rod. So congratulations to all of our winners.
I'm sorry, Jeannie.
Hey, wow. Thank
Who
you
won,
very
who
much.
won, who won prize 1? The rod?
Dave Hausler as well.
Dave,
Whoa.
did you just brag Jeannie
Yeah.
directly, or how'd you pull that off?
Hey, well, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
You
Okay,
just
well, I need to take Dave some things, so I'll just take the raffle prizes to him as well. So,
wow.
Appreciate it.
All right, congrats.
yeah, I have one more announcement. I'm helping out Paul tonight. He came up with a contest to go along with his presentation tonight, and it'll just take 5 minutes, but he wants everyone to guess how many lake trout were taken out of Yellowstone Lake in 2020. And the answers can be between 200,000 and 500,000. And you just need to put that in chat, and I'll time the 5 minutes. And then during the presentation, he'll announce the winners, or give the answer, I guess I should say. And he also said something about putting the winners' names in the February newsletter. So anyway, so go ahead and put your answer into chat between 200,000 and 500,000 lake trout.
So Jeannie, can I play along, even though Paul already gave me the answer?
Oh, he wouldn't let me do it. So, but I have to say there are 2 prizes, and one is for the closest answer to being correct, and one is for the farthest away losing answer, I guess you would say, except they both win a prize, and they're great prizes. So I'll let Paul tell about those.
All right. So then we'll go ahead right with Paul's presentation, and you'll look at those answers. Is that right, Jeannie? While we're going with.
So am I on?
Watch the answers and record the names. So.
Okay, then yeah, Paul, I think the floor is yours. Please take it away.
Sounds good to me. Yes.
I just put it on.
Oh, we can kind of hear
I
you.
brought
You're a
this
bit
with me,
choppy.
so-
I don't think this.
Okay, I'm trying to share the screen and it's
just.
just giving me a little circle. So we'll see what's. Oh, here we go. Does everyone see that?
Not yet. It
No,
may
no.
take a few seconds. Do you see anything, Zach?
No.
Excuse me?
Paul, if it won't work for some reason, we'll give it a second, but I can go ahead and share and,
Are you having difficulty?
Yeah, we don't see anything yet as far as a screen share. I think we just lost Paul, so
No.
yeah. Hey, Colin, you there? You want to do Fly Expo, and then we can jump into Paul after that?
Yeah, I am here, but I don't have everything in front of me as I'm driving and calling in on my phone.
No.
But I can generally say, I've also got my buddy's cat in the car if you hear the meowing.
Yes.
I can generally say that the meeting is, our next meeting is the Fly Fishing Expo. We have 5 tires. We're going to use the breakout room function within Zoom so that everyone can rotate through and see the different tires. They are working on providing me with material list, which we will send out to all attendees. So if you want, I should have that completed by next week. And then I can send that out so everyone can stock up on the materials if they want to tie along throughout the expo. We'll still have the silent auction. We're going to be using a really wonderful platform that CTU used for their silent auction last year at their gala. So we'll be able to do that, and we'll be able to open up the bidding on that a week ahead of the expo. So I should be home by the time that this is over, and I can give you a more robust update on it at that time.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Did we get Paul back yet? Paul, are you there? Well, problem with Zoom meetings.
Let's see, I was just going to suggest, Zach, maybe could you bring up his presentation, and then hopefully Paul will get back and get his audio, and maybe we could have the presentation ready.
Sure.
I don't know, that's
Oh, I think John's about to give us an update here.
So that was Brother Paul just called me, and he should be updated with you folks in just a minute or two.
Okay, cool. I see him hopping back on here. Thanks, John.
all right, great, thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and share here, and we can knock that out. Everybody see that on my screen?
Yes.
Yep, looks good.
Hopefully Paul can take us through it here shortly. Paul, I see you. Can you hear us? We don't hear you if you're speaking.
In the interest of giving Paul another minute or two, I thought I would just toss out a question. You know, I guess it was just last year, right, that we started doing that pub and dub up in Fort Collins. And I was just wondering if anybody here tonight would be interested, maybe, you know, once or twice over the next couple months, if anybody would want to get together and just for a little tie-in session, you know, virtually via Zoom. I guess if there is any interest, then, you know, just you could let me know and we'll get something organized.
Sounds great, Mark.
Yep.
All right.
So
No,
we
that-
are-
Paul, we see your screen now.
Okay,
Glad to have you back, and I think we hear you.
great. Okay, sorry about that interruption, but let me get started if it's okay with everyone. I just want to let you know that if anybody asks you who you're watching, just tell them it's Paul from TU and I'm wearing khakis. Couple people understood that. Here's the 2 items that we're going to give away. Whoever comes closest is going to get a Trout Unlimited coffee mug. And on the right is the recently published TU Eastern Brook Trout poster. If you go to the TU Native Trout Working Group, you'll see that they've created multiple beautiful posters, mostly from the West, but and this is their first attempt at the Eastern Brook Trout. So full disclosure up front, I am not a scientist. I'm not a fisheries biologist, as some of you are. I am just a avid, average fly fisherman. I could barely say that I'm actually that, but I give it a try every once in a while. So I know my limitations, but I do have some resources that if you ask me a question, I'll be able to give you some answers. The person on the left is Dr. Todd Cole. He's the director of the fisheries in Yellowstone National Park. To the top right, Dr. Pat Bigelow, a fisheries biologist. And on the bottom is Nathan Thomas, who is also a fisheries biologist. And eventually, when we get the program up and running, he is going to be the connection between us, the volunteer fly fishing program in the park. Anything unusual about this picture?
Not native trout.
How come the guys are the only ones that are fishing and the Dr. Bigelow is the only one that's working?
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways, I tend to enjoy myself when I do these presentations. So this is if you remember the song from Cheers, everybody needs a place where they can go and everybody knows their name. Well, in this instance, everybody needs a place where nobody knows your name, so you can be yourself. And that's what Yellowstone's all about for me. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about tonight is the saving of the Yellowstone cutthroat trout. It's going to be divided into two sections. One is on the lake and the other is on the program. First, we'll talk about the lake trout. The entire purpose is for these young class fish to grow up to these, mature adults that can spawn away and reproduce and save the population. So that's the entire focus on the program. You've probably seen a couple of these charts before, but this picture was taken in the late 1800s. And if you do the math correctly, at least from my standpoint, you're looking at my great-great-grandfather and my great-grandfather, and my grandfather is the actual one taking the pictures. So, I mean, fishing was good back then. I mean, this was a Sunday afternoon in the park. In the real old days, if some of you may have been up in the park when there was actually fishing allowed at Fishing Bridge. Fishing Bridge is the major road across the river as the river flows out of the lake and heads through the park and then eventually flows into the Missouri. But for a long time, people were allowed to fish on the bridge with any type of bait. And it was just, elbow to elbow with people fishing. In the old days, we're talking 1980, there was plenty of fish. In fact, the park estimated there was 4 million cutthroat in Yellowstone Lake, and they were from all different age classes. About 15 years later, they realized that the population was going down and some of the younger age classes were disappearing. Eventually, the only fish that were left were these large, mature fish that went up to the creeks to spawn and then came back into the lake. There was very few young class trout. And in actuality, in 2008, the population that started out as 4 million was reduced by 90 to 95%. And there was about 250 to 300,000 Yellowstone cutthroat left in the lake by 2008. So what happened? Lake trout happened. And also drought and whirling disease. Drought because the Yellowstone cutthroat need flows in the spring to go up to spawn. And they did find whirling disease up by the Pelican Valley in the northern part of the lake. But the real major culprit was the lake trout. And one of the big questions that everybody asks is how did they get into Yellowstone Lake? Because Yellowstone Lake was supposed to be a pristine water that only had Yellowstone cutthroats in it. Well, they were introduced in the mid 1980s, and this has been the main culprit, or at least the thought of culprit of how the lake trout got into Yellowstone Lake. There was a bucket brigade between Lake Lewis down here, and they were brought up to Yellowstone Lake. I've actually talked to a couple of fishermen who guided out of Jackson and told stories about at night, they would get lake trout and bring them up into buckets and put them into Yellowstone Lake. Another reason for the lake trout in Yellowstone is the 1988 fire suppression. They would scoop water out from the surrounding water areas, and potentially they would have picked up some lake trout and dumped them into Yellowstone Lake. And then recently, they thought there was some possible migration during high water times in early spring in Two Ocean Pass. And Two Ocean Pass is an area in the thoroughfare, which is in south of the park. And we've known about this particular part of the park for many, many years. In fact, this is a drawing by the author, Dr. Heverman, in 1895 of an area in the park that creeks go into two different directions, one to the Atlantic and one to the Pacific. In a more modern map, you'll see that in this is where the Two Ocean Pass comes together, the creeks, the Pacific Creek and the Atlantic Creek. The problem was that in the late 1800s, they actually stocked lake trout in Lewis Lake and Heart Lake because people wanted more fishing opportunities in the park. What happened is those lake trout went down Lewis River into Jackson Lake. Eventually, the lake trout populated, got over the dam and started going up to Pacific Creek. And this is what a current picture of what the two oceans, the parting of the waters, the Two Ocean Pass of the Two Ocean Creek area. During the springtime, this bog area here becomes full of water. So they've finally decided that it's easy for fish to come from Pacific Creek and pass over to Atlantic Creek and then go into Yellowstone Lake. So now they're beginning to realize that perhaps some of the reasons that they once were given of why lake trout were in Yellowstone Lake really isn't proper. In fact, the big thing is that it was first recorded angler catch in 1994. That's the big problem, because between the 80s and 1994, those lake trout went undetected. And in the meantime, they're growing, they're eating cutthroat, approximately 40 cutthroat a year. This particular model is called the Statistical Catch at Age Assessment Model. It is done every year by the Michigan State University. It breaks down what they feel is the age or the entire population of lake trout into 3 age groups: less than 2, 3 to 5, and then the mature lake trout over 6 years old. And again, a mature lake trout begins to mature and starts to spawn when they become 5 or 6 years old. They found in Yellowstone, because of the pristine waters, they actually spawn a little bit earlier. So as I said, their main menu is young little cutthroats. They can eat up to 40 cutthroats a year. A 24-inch laker can actually eat a 12-inch cutthroat. So just thinking about the numbers, a lake trout will spawn 8,000 eggs at a time. If 10% of those survive, imagine how the numbers grew. What really impacted was the impact on the Yellowstone cutthroat spawning. There's a spawning station in Clear Creek, which is on the east side of the lake. And up until the 1980s, there was about 45,000 cutthroat going through the gauging station. And in 2006, there was less than 500. So there was a major problem. And also there was a major problem on the ecosystems. This is a picture of the 4 major mammals and birds and the otters that were living around the lake while the cutthroat were in their large numbers, 4 million. After the lake trout introduction, the ospreys went away. Before the lake trout introduction, they had 38 osprey nests. Now they only have 2. as the cutthroat disappeared even more, then the eagles went away. And unfortunately for the eagles, they have other prey that they can use to feed on. Unfortunately for the osprey, they don't. They are specifically fish eaters. And then we have the otters in the lower right. As the population went down further, they went away. And then the grizzlies that would come to the creeks in the spring had to change their diets. And all of a sudden they started eating on the elk and the buffalo that were in around the local area. So when they found that the Yellowstone cutthroat population was crashing, they immediately started some suppression efforts, namely the gill netting effort. The boat up in your top left is the Freedom. My wife and I, Suzanne, actually spent a day on this boat in 2008 and helped process the fish that they gill netted during the night. They would set the nets out at night. 3 or 4, 5 days later, they would go back, pull the nets up. The lake trout that they caught, they would cut the air bladder, and then they would throw them back into the lake just so that the structure of the lake would stay the same. Some key terms going forward that I wanted to talk about. They really focus on 2 sizes of mesh that they use on the gill netting boats. The small mesh, which are 1 inch to 1.5 inches, and these are for the smaller lake trout. A big lake trout going into one of these small meshes, they'll just bump into it and turn around. And then they have the large mesh, which is 1 3/4 and above, and these are for the larger lake trout. The smaller lake trout will go right through them. The next measure is a unit of effort, and this is how they gauge how much effort they're expending each year on the lake. And it's 1 unit of effort is basically 100 feet or meters of net soaked overnight for 1 night. So for example, and then the other term is the catch per unit of effort, or basically, which is the number of fish caught in a unit of effort. So 3 nets soaked for 3 nights equals 9 total unit of efforts. If that net caught 36 fish, then 4 would be the catch per unit of effort. So that's what they really use to monitor how effective and how efficient their gill netting sessions are. This is a graph of all the lake trout that have been removed. Up until 2020, there have been about 4 million lake trout removed since they first started gill netting operations. As you can see that during the early years, it was quite low. And then in the late 20 and the teens, it picked up tremendously. The reason is because the Park Service only had 1 vessel to really handle all of the gill netting. Eventually, in about 2003 and 2004, they added a 2nd boat, but still they weren't making a difference in the recovery of the Yellowstone cutthroat. So in 2008 and 2010, they convened a scientific review panel. They also established a Yellowstone Lake work group, which, if you know Dave Sweet from Cody, Wyoming, from the Cody chapter, he actually visited our chapter in Fort Collins and asked for help in the gill netting process. Yellowstone Forever gave us a grant. It cost $2 million a year to run this gill netting operation. So what they decided to do is to hire some professional gill netters from the Great Lakes, the Hickey brothers, and they also established a native fish conservation plan, so they had a path forward. So in 2012, they actually started to have 6 gill netting boats, 3 of the parks and 3 from Hickey brothers, going around the lake and doing all of the gill netting. This particular graph shows how much poundage is removed each year. It's based upon the units of effort. So for example, the bars are the unit of effort. So for 2018, they probably had 98,000 units of effort. And then they divided into the fish that they caught, and this would determine what the catch per unit was, catch per unit of effort. So as you can see that eventually it was going high because this is the sort of like the low-hanging fruit of the lake trout population. They knew where the large ones were. They focused on the spawning beds. So they really took out a lot of the biomass, the weight out of the lake trout population. And now as they're getting the smaller lake trout, that catch per unit of effort is going down. It's taking them, it's making them use a lot of effort to catch fewer fish. And this particular chart looks at the large mesh. And these are the ones that are going for the larger lake trout. As you can see, this is the number of lake trout that were removed. This is the line is the catch per unit of effort. So you can see they've removed a lot of the older class, mature lake trout. This is the small mesh. And so this particular chart shows you that there's still a lot of smaller class lake trout remaining in the lake, and they're still catching quite a few of them each year. So this is the answer to the question. Last year, they put out 5,800 miles of gill net, and they removed 325,952 lake trout out of the lake. If you actually calculated the miles in net, that's like going from Fort Collins to Tokyo, Japan. So that is a lot of net. And then when you consider only 325,000 fish, that's a lot of effort that's being expended to remove those lake trout. But there's been a positive response to it. This chart, each year in September, August, September, the park will do an assessment of both the cutthroat and the lake trout, and this is for the cutthroat. In 2010, during that assessment, they had 510 cutthroats that they caught in the nets. And this was the length distribution of those 510, expressed in meters, but for us that deal with inches, 8 inches is down here, 20 inches, that was the majority of fish that they caught in those nets. Then when you compare it to what they got in 2018, you can see that the gill netting effort has really paid dividends to have the younger class cutthroats come back. In fact, during that assessment period, they actually netted 1,347 cutthroat in the nets. So things are looking up. It's not as bad as it was in 2005. And what they're focusing now, and this particular graph breaks it down into the 3 age groups, less than 2, 3 to 5, and the mature fish 6 or older. So what they're trying to do now is attack the problem by targeting the younger age class lake trout. So what they did with the help of TU is that they actually had transponders or tags implanted in the lake trout, and they call them Judas fish because they're actually portraying the where they're actually going to spawn. So what they actually did is they found 14 major spawning areas around Yellowstone Lake. This is where Fishing Bridge is up here, Bridge Bay, and the Grand Loop Road comes around here. Okay, and there's a small little island called Carrington Island, and you'll see a couple of pictures of that coming up. So what they've tried to do is how can we best efficiently and effectively remove these eggs coming from the spawners. They started out with trying to suction them up, and I call this the Dyson method. I mean, they tried to do it, but it was very labor intensive. The nooks and crannies of where the lake trout spawn just didn't make a very efficient method. The next one was the old Sparky method, basically trying to electroshock the eggs and the embryos to death. But unfortunately, Yellowstone Lake is so pristine and so clear that the electricity does not go down to where the embryos and the eggs and the embryos actually live. So that was declined as well. They also tried to do what I call the rain delay method. This is my favorite team from the Red Sox Nation, putting the tarps over the field. And that's what they tried to do. They actually tried to put tarps over the spawning sites of the lake trout. Again, that didn't work very labor intensive. So they couldn't do that. And so they went back to the laboratory and they said, well, what happens if we cover them up with carcasses? And so it does two things. It acts like a tarp, but as the lake trout begin to decompose over the lake, the spawning beds, it sucks out all the dissolved oxygen in the water to the point where the eggs and the embryos actually suffocate from the lack of oxygen. But there's a problem. Where do you store enough lake trout during the summer to apply during a 2 to 3 week period in September when the lake trout are actually spawning? Well, they had to come up with another method. And so what they came up with was something that the soybean farmers said, thank you, Yellowstone Lake. They came up with a small soy-based pellet that does the same thing as the decomposition process of a lake trout carcass. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of pellets to do this, and it's very difficult to target the spawning beds. But what they did in 2019 during the spawning season is they hired a helicopter and they made 38 trips with these bucketfuls of pellets and covered the spawning areas around Carrington Island, which is right here. And this is very visible as you go along the Grand Loop Road. So you might ask, what happens to all this material over time? So they looked at it and they actually did heavy dosages and medium dosages. And after 5 days, this is what it looked, this is what it looked like. After 21 days, it had dissolved to this point. After 39 days, it practically had left no remnants whatsoever. So what they're doing is trying to target those spawning beds. What they found was that the spawning beds around Carrington Island, the oxygen went down to 0 within 2 days of the application of the pellets. And then in the spring, they looked at their fry cages and they found that they didn't have any fry in those cages whatsoever. So for this particular technique, it seems like this is going to be the solution to attack the problem from egg embryo stage till they become young adults. Here's another recently discovered invasive species that in 2019, they actually gill netted a live Cisco lake, which is actually a lake herring. It was caught in August 2019. It was live, immature, 3 years old. However, when they did the microchemistry of the otolith, which is their age bone in the ears, it indicated that it probably had hatched in Yellowstone Lake 3 years prior, which means that mom and dad were also in the lake. So the good news is that this is the preferred diet of lake trout. The bad news is that it also competes with the Yellowstone cutthroat over zooplankton and bugs. So it's an issue that they haven't found any more since August of 2019, but through eDNA, they're going to continue their research to see if they can find any populations of these guys around the lake. Last September, I actually found another invasive species that really didn't show up until I actually went camping. And I actually saw this guy as I left the Grant camping area. This potted pig being walked around by some guy. So hopefully he didn't get off the leash. Another problem that's facing the park, climate change. is everybody aware that in 2016, there was a massive fish kill on the Yellowstone River between Gardner and about 150 miles downstream. In fact, it closed all recreation, including all fishing, for the entire summer and fall. It mostly affected whitefish. In fact, we were there in the park when it happened, and they asked us to fish the northern parts of the Yellowstone River to see if we could catch some in the park, to see if we could catch some whitefish so they could examine them to find out if they were actually carrying the PKT microbe that caused this kill-off. And so they've already decided, they already know that low water conditions are going to impact the Yellowstone cutthroat spawning. And they also know that rising water temperatures and flows are going to impact their spawning cycles. So, in the future, they're going to have to really do some aggressive monitoring of what's happening. So as far as the park, that's all I have at Yellowstone Lake. Do you have any questions on that? If you do, you can send them to me by my email, and I'll gladly answer them by email, or I'll get with the Todd and Pat and Nathan and see if we can get you an answer. Any questions?
Paul, can I jump in and ask you a question?
Please.
This is Mark. I'm assuming that the gill netting plus dropping those pellets on the spawning beds, that's something that's just going to have to continue pretty much forever. Is that right?
That is correct. Their goal, according to their native fish conservation plan, is when they get to 100,000 lake trout population, they will need to continue that for 5 years. So if they never get down to that 100,000 population, that process is going to go on for a long time. So they've signed a 5-year agreement with the Hickey brothers. So they're in for a long time.
But it's good to see good progress then is being made.
Yes,
right?
they have done amazing progress.
Nice. Great presentation. Thank you.
Okay, that's the first part. The second part is the Yellowstone Volunteer Fly Fishing Program and how you can help. I've been part of this program since 2006. I was introduced to it from my brother, John, and it has been perhaps the best experience that I've had volunteering in my entire life. I spent a lot of time in the military, 20 years. And I can remember the first time a sergeant came up to me and said, "Whatever you do, Bunker, never, ever volunteer." I mean, that was the rule. I wish he could have seen me 40 years later doing this in Yellowstone National Park. So basically, it was started in 2002, and you realize that the fisheries office was involved in a lot of different areas, specifically the lake. So they had to ask us to become citizen science to do a lot of their work outside of Yellowstone Lake to also restore the native fish population. So between 2002 and 16, a lot of volunteers have spent a lot of hours catching a lot of fish, trying to restore the native fish populations around the park. The last 2 years of the program, we focused on the Lamar River, focusing on the hybridization problem between rainbows and pure cuts. And what's good to know is that it's funded by the Park Service. We actually got a grant from the Western Native Trout Initiative, $5,000, and it's also funded through Yellowstone Forever. So we're funded to get the program started. And so what we're trying to do is to negate the introduction of the non-natives. As I said about the lake trout and being stocked in the late 1800s, the same thing happened during the early 1900s with rainbows and brookies and browns, because people wanted additional angling opportunities. So the park wanted to provide that. So they did a lot of non-native stocking and not realizing what they were doing 50 years, what they were going to do 50 years down the road. So here's a couple of projects that we were on. This is Trout Creek, a tributary of the Yellowstone River. We walked up 5 or 6 miles and fished for these little fingerlings, and they just wanted to find out what the DNA was of the fish that we caught. Another project was catching and marking grayling along the Gibbon River to find out their movements, so that they can begin to restore the grayling fishery along the Gibbon, as well as the West Slope cutthroats in the Grayling Creek area. In the western side of the park, we actually helped them test the viability of these berms so that they could actually create pure West Slope cutthroat ponds. And then once they found out that they couldn't be breached, then they would kill off all the fish in the creek. Then they would restore them with West Slopes and grayling. A lot of our work in the later years was trying to determine the scope of the hybridization and remove non-natives from the northeast corner of the park. This is my wife, Suzanne, pulling out and applying the Vulcan death grip to the most likely a hybrid rainbow cut out of Slough Creek. This was a pretty interesting project. But the most interesting project was similar to what they did in the lake. There was a Montana State University student who also did telemetry studies with the same process of catching large cutthroat, implanting them with receivers, and then finding out where their spawning beds were and how they moved up and down the Lamar River. And one of the neat things about the program is the yellow bucket and our interaction with the public. Oftentimes, the first question out of someone's mouth would be, what's with the yellow bucket? And then we would tell them basically, well, we catch fish, fill the bucket up with water, put the fish in the bucket, bring it to the coordinator, who then takes samples of the scales and fins, weighs them, so that we can return these particular rivers to a natural, a native fish habitat. And they said, well, you put them back into the water? Well, yes, of course we do. And to a lot of people, the concept of catch and release is extremely foreign. So our ability to get involved with the public was one of the really rewarding parts of this particular program. So here's where we stand at the current. We've been in a 4-year hiatus. First year was a coordinator took a sabbatical, which was good. Then we lost dedicated beds out of the research dorm because it was condemned. You've heard of the deferred maintenance problem in the parks. That was one of the problems, was the buildings were really getting dilapidated. 2 years ago was the government shutdown. Last year was COVID. And excuse me, this year we're facing the same kind of critical housing shortage, because what the park is doing is they're tearing down, removing all the FEMA trailers that they used to house the park employees with. And these were pretty dilapidated. I mean, Yellowstone winters are pretty hard. And so what they're replacing them with is these very functional modular cabins. And until that's complete, we're going to have a housing problem. As my brother John and who's the nurse? Who's the nurse on the board that we have at Rocky Mountain? From the last meeting, you said we have a nurse that's in the chapter.
Ruthie, that's me, Paul.
That's Ruthie. Ruthie can tell you that from today going forward, there's a lot of questions. And so because of the COVID protocols that the park have put in place, there's going to be, that even makes the critical housing shortage worse. For example, a house with 3 bedrooms can only have 1 person in it. So 2 bedrooms go to complete waste. And staffing shortages because of budget shortfalls in the park. Dunraven Pass, which is the main north-south thoroughfare between Canyon and Roosevelt, is closed for the 2nd year of being repaved. And so that turns an 1.5-hour drive into 2.5 to 3 hours drive. So that's 6 hours on the road in any given day, going from Bridge Bay Fishing Bridge to the northeast corner of the park. Pretty tough. So we're encouraging a do-it-yourself type of philosophy this year. Lodge on your own, dine on your own, eat on your own, fish on your own, drive on your own, and conduct creel surveys that are designated by the park. There is in the Gibbon River area where they have reintroduced the grayling in the West Slope, the northeast corner, to see if there's any hybrids or if there's any pure rainbows. Strictly creel surveys that they can use to make decisions on how many resources that need to be applied. So we're planning for a next year restart. For example, one of the projects that's coming up, there's an MSU grad student that is starting his thesis this year. And basically what he's going to do is go back and validate with the Park Service all of the studies that they've done on the Lamar River Valley, such as hybridization and spawning, and to develop some sampling methodologies so that they can actually know when the population is either going up or needs more attention. I'm going to try to put together a trip for the chapter in late August. We'll be staying at Canyon Lodge area, and we'll be camping, and we'll be spending an entire week. And so we'll be fishing both the Gibbon area, grayling area, and also in the northeast corner. So come join us. You might be able to catch one of these 31-inch cutthroats that they caught last year, the Idaho state record. But Yellowstone is a special place, and I would just love to get a group of us to go up there this fall and get some of the same passion that I have for it. It's just an amazing place. Any questions about the program? There's my email. If you're interested, let me know. And if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them either now or via email. If you're interested, shoot me an email and I'll get you in the loop.
Yeah, Paul, Mark again. Can I
Yeah.
jump in there with a question or two?
Okay.
So let's see. So basically, like you said, everything is on your own, lodging on your own, meals on your own. So did you mention a certain campground?
The
Or not?
problem with Yellowstone campgrounds is that the only campgrounds that are reservable are Canyon Lodge, Bridge Bay, and the Madison in Grant Village. They all require a lengthy drive to get to the northeast corner where a lot of the projects are going to be. All of the camping sites in the northeast corner, Slough Creek, Pebble Creek, Mammoth, are first come, first serve. So if you don't get there at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're going to be staying in your car for a few nights. So that's the problem. But Canyon Village has an excellent campsite. And my wife and I stayed there for a week last September. First week of September, it was just amazing. You get to fish the Yellowstone River. The Gibbon is within 15 minutes away. Cascade Creek, where you can catch grayling, is less than a 10-minute drive. And then just the 2-hour drive over to the northeast corner, that's worth it any day of the week, to tell you the truth. I mean, you go through some scenery and see some animals that are just amazing.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then that Canyon Village, can you make reservations there for camping?
Yes, I checked. I have 4 campsites reserved for the last week of August.
Okay.
And there'll be more information about the program and in the next fly paper.
All right. Yeah, I think that's something, if people can find the time, it sure would be a fun thing to get involved with. All right, Paul, anything else from you?
That is it for me.
All right, thank you very
Thank
much.
you once again for the invite. I know I did this 2 years ago, but there's a lot of new information, a lot of new discoveries, and it's an ongoing process. The biologists keep telling me they're learning how to do this better and better and better as each summer passes. So good things are coming to Yellowstone.
All right, very good presentation. Thank you very much. Really, really interesting.
You're very welcome.
Yep. Thanks, Paul. Great presentation.
Nice job, little brother.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Thanks for getting me out there.
I just want to give a shout out to Paul. He's worked so hard over the last decade in putting this presentation together and for several different chapters. And he and I partnered to raise $25,000 to put this program back together. So I want to give a shout out to my brother.
Wow.
Round of applause.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank Mike. And for folks that came on that I invited to volunteer, thank you for your interest, and we'll see you in the park.
All right. Yeah. Thanks to those folks that joined us for tonight, just for this. All right. With that, let's see. I wanted to ask Colin, or I assume Colin, you're there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm not home yet, so I don't have anything in front.
Okay.
The only thing I could add to what I said at the beginning of the meeting is we should have all the pertinent information on both the website and next month's newsletter, as well as the poster that Zach put together. He did some great design on that.
Oh,
And
I'm sharing that right now, so it should be helpful. Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've pulled over so I can see it. And the other thing to bring to note is this is the one meeting a year that we charge an entry for. It's a fundraiser, both the expo and the silent auction. So it is $20 per ticket, just like in years past. I just want to make that clear to everyone.
So Colin, a question, Dave Morse here.
Yes, sir.
Are you still accepting donations for the auctions?
I most certainly am. We're going to, you can email me directly. My email is cglover@thegroup Inc. I think, or what am I, Director B for the at RockyMountainFlycasters.org. But yes, I am still accepting them. Please feel free to reach out with phone calls or emails to me, and then I can connect you with the correct donation form. We'll also need a photograph of any donations this year, so that way we can have them on the online silent auction site.
Thank you.
And bidding for the silent auction actually opens a week before the event, so you can go to that link and start bidding on February 10th.
Okay, let's see then if I, yeah, Colin, I sure apologize for bugging you while you're trying to drive home, but thank you for. Can I ask you real quickly then, at some point in the not too distant future, I think you have a list, right, of all the people and companies that donated to our expo last year, and I guess can you maybe via email in the next week or two give us a little update on how we're doing for donations for this year's expo, and then maybe some of us can look at that list and still help contact some of those companies and some of those people to see if they'll be able to donate this year. Everybody, so basically, yeah, if you need any help, then please let us know.
Yeah, most certainly, Mark. I've got a full email inbox with a lot of donations, so I need to get them all processed and put onto the spreadsheet I'm using to track it, and then I'd be happy to share that. I can tell you some of the places that have donated in the past are restaurants, and that was in the form of gift cards. And we're not really seeing that this year, but I am reaching out to some new places, and Ruthie's been really great with finding some new places as well for kind of more experiential things that will maybe be a little more exciting than bidding on a gift card.
Okay, great, great. Thank you. And yeah, thanks to you and Jeannie. You guys are doing a boatload of work there, so sure appreciate that. All right. I guess with that, I'll just kind of open it up for here a couple minutes. If there's anybody who has anything they'd like to mention or any announcements, and then we'll wrap this up.
Mark, I just wanted to tell Paul, if he didn't see the chat, that the closest to the right answer was Ted Salmon over,
All right,
although
Ted.
he went over at 355,000. And then Paul Weir was the furthest away at 490,000. So
Paul, you've been watching too much Price is Right.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Congratulations, Ted.
Thank you.
So Paul will get those prizes to those folks or to us or something, and we can get them.
Ted, where are you from?
I live up, near Red Feather Lakes.
Okay. Good reason to go fishing.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, if nobody has anything else, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Really interesting presentation. Jeannie, thanks again for running the raffle. I think we had pretty good results on the raffle. I think, didn't we earn over $700?
805 the last time I looked.
All right. All right. Must have been that really fancy net that I made, right?
Well, Dave's going to enjoy it, I'm sure.
Yeah, hope you do, Dave.
Yeah, if I'd have known, I wouldn't have restrung my old net with new rubber this weekend. Anyway, I got
You can donate it to the expo.
Yeah. Okay, great.
All right. Well, hey, good to see everybody. And even though you're in these tiny little squares on my screen, and I'm sure hopeful that maybe by mid or late summer, maybe we can start meeting face to face again. So with that, I'll just say good night. Thanks everybody, and you all are the engines that make this thing run. So thanks for what you do. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Good night.
Okay, good night.